very, very pleased to see all of you here. And it's just really a thrill to be having these monthly dialogues that provide information and insight, inspiration, and essentially provide a safe space for people to talk about issues around gender identity. If I can ask you, everyone actually to put themselves on mute, but also have their video on. So if you put your audio on mute, but your video on, that would be great. Let me say that we are recording this, but we are not going to be using the audio. We are recording this only for purposes of audio history. So to that point, we have just started a YouTube channel, and that is very much thanks to my very trusted and fabulously talented young woman friend, Alexandra, who is on the call. And she is helping me get my message out to the world through social media, through web, and now through YouTube. So thank you, Alex, for your undying patience with me and help. So thank you. So that's why we can all have our videos up. So I want to say this is a very special, well, each dialogue is a special one. This is particularly special because it involves a discussion around how to step into courage with your family, how to speak your truth, how to have difficult conversations around your own difference, in this case, gender identity, with your family. Because those who have a difficult conversation to have don't know what the results will be. They don't know if being authentic and honest will land them on the street or get them ostracized or limit the love that they feel. There is no guarantee that when they communicate these difficult conversations that they will be received with love and support. And so I have today, so honored to have these two people today to speak about how they came out to family and what their experiences have been, for good, for bad, for indifference, and what has gotten them here today in very healthy, well presence. So before I introduce our guests, Stephanie Howard and Joe Hart-Day, I would just like to, again, to say thank you for everyone for being here. And to also remind you, many of you are getting the newsletters. I just also want to remind you that exciting news that we are in Indigo Books, and the more people who purchase through Indigo Books, the more the book will be on the top of their list, and they'll be able to send it out on their their own email chats. And so I really encourage you to go there to buy books. I also will be sending out links. I have sent out links to the YouTube channel, and will continue to send that out so that you can access that. And one last thing before we turn the conversation over to our dialogue, and that is to say that when you do hear about these dialogues, please share the information with your community. The more people who are part of these conversations, the more people will feel safe around knowing how to have these conversations, and the more informed people will be. So I really encourage you to just share. So with that, I would like to turn this over to Joe and Stephanie and welcome them. First of all, I'd like to welcome Stephanie Howard. I really want to acknowledge Steph, who has been really part of my journey from nearly the beginning. When I first started doing my research some 5 years ago, I reached out to many organizations to find out if there were any people who wanted to talk to me about their trans experience. And I received a note from Steph. It was this, I'm not even sure what path you came to me on, but it was just really wonderful. And we have become friends, and you've been a really wonderful support for so long, Stephanie. I really want to say thank you. With that, I'd like to just briefly introduce you. So professionally, you are part of the forensic unit with the OPP service, Ontario Police. And although you're a civilian with the Ontario Police, you work very directly with them in a very high level of forensic services. So I want to welcome you and invite you to add, what have I missed? I've missed a lot, of course, but is there anything else that you'd like to add to that introduction?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Suzanne. Hope everyone can hear me okay. Yeah, I am working in the forensic unit, and I've been there probably for nearly over 30 years now. So it's been a long time. So yeah, and back in 2015 was when I actually transitioned at work. So that was another big change in my life as well. So I've been trans all my life. Yeah, it's been quite a challenge, and with families and stuff. And I'm really happy to be a part of this as well, for Suzanne's conversation today on families, because I have a family, and I got 3 kids, actually triplets. So that was an interesting challenge all by itself. So it was, yeah. So anyway, that's kind of, we'll get more into that when I go through some of these conversations later on. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Steph. Joe. So I'm very pleased to introduce Joe Hart Day. I love that name, Joe Hart Day. I met Joe quite recently, actually, through Steph. The two of them are colleagues. Joe also works for the Ontario Public Service, the OPS. Joe is in correctional services. He's an officer. As an officer and a manager in operations. Am I getting that right?
It's an operational manager. I'm actually a sergeant. Yes, I'm a sergeant on the floor.
Okay, that's great. And so it's and you also are with the union. You've done a lot of training with the union as well.
Yeah, so I started with the Ontario Public Service 25 years ago as a correctional officer working the floor in a correctional facility. I've been in the ministry, like I said, 25 years. I got 5 years left of retirement. I'm really counting those days. I started as a officer. I did a lot of work in the union. I was a co-facilitator. I did different courses and I taught stuff like that. And then I competed to be a operational manager, and I have the rank of sergeant. So I supervise staff. I don't have as much direct supervision over the offender population, but I'm still very much involved with staffing on the floors.
Great, thank you. That's so great. I just want to say also that Steph does a lot of training too. In your role, yeah. You have done a lot of training in this particular area, in the equity and inclusion area.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, when I transitioned at work, I realized even before I came out at work was just that there was just such a lack of information out there and support resources for somebody like myself, and nobody else had come out transitioned within the OPP. So I was kind of the first person to do that. So like a lot of things, you kind of realize that I'm on my own, so I'll just do as much research as I can, get all the information I need ready before I come out to my supervisor. So that's what I did. And anyway, but the transition itself went reasonably okay. But just the challenges, I guess, of not just coming out as well, but because there was lack of information, that's where I really got involved in the training aspect of it. So I was really kind of had to make a decision whether I wanted to sort of just live my life and stay under the radar and just just coming into work and doing my work and going back home again. But I realized because of the lack of education out there, I just thought, no, I've got an opportunity now to try and dispel some of those misconceptions around transgender. And so that's when I became what we call a positive space champion. It's a program that I'm actually one of the co-leads for the Ontario Public Service as well. So we manage that program, and Joe's one of our trainers as well with that. So that really got into working and meeting people, but also just really sort of sharing personal stories just about what it's like to be trans, as well as some of the challenges that we have to deal with along the way. So it's been really, really good feedback, and I've really enjoyed become very passionate about it. So I was really happy to meet Suzanne, and then even though that was not necessarily work related, but at the same time, it was around the time I was just getting more comfortable talking about it. And then we connected, and so I've been kind of interested in her journey with her as well. So I'm really happy to be here today. So
great, thank you. All right. Well, with that, I'd like to begin. We have there's some questions that I want to pose, and as we begin to discuss this, it will reveal itself what your challenges were, what the stepping stones were as you shifted your own awareness into your family. And so this is the first question that to pose. What were some of your key considerations in coming out to family? So maybe Steph, you can talk about that. And I just want to say also, please, for everyone, please write in the chat. So the chat is there, please write your comments. I'm just going to write, hi everyone. Please write here. So write your comments, write your questions, and that's a really good way for us to be aware of what you want to hear about and what is concerning you. Okay, sorry, Steph.
Yeah, so the key considerations, it was, I think when I got to the point in my life where I needed to realize that I was going to come out, the first thing, of course, was my family, because this is just the people around me I'm closest to, that I care the most about. And whatever was going to happen at work or anywhere else, among my extended family or friends or something, it was just those close enough to me that I had the biggest concern about. So, I mean, this all kind of happened. It's something I've struggled with my gender all my life, but it wasn't until 2011 that I lost my mother to cancer, and it happened very, very quick. So I had to sort of deal with that, and that was really, really traumatic because I was very, very close to her. And at that point, though, that was a really big turning point in my life, because finally I was able to see just how fragile life was, because we tend to go through life just okay, just one day, next day, and so on. But certainly when we lose a loved one, I'm sure every one of us here has experienced that, what it feels like. And for me, the fragility of life would just really put everything into focus for me about where my own life was going. So that was the beginning of about probably 18 months of self-reflection and about whether I could go full time and live my authentic self. But my family, I mean, how would it affect them? And I was just running through all kinds of different scenarios just to kind of try and grasp what kind of things, challenges I was going to face with the family, because understanding like every one of them is individual. And I mentioned earlier, I got triplets, but they're all individual people with individual personalities. So I was very, very aware of that. So it's no one size fits all, as like just sitting down with everybody and say, oh, by the way, this is what's happening. I sort out to sort of had to plan how I was going to approach it. Now, because I mentioned as at the beginning, because I work in forensics, so most of our job is analysis. So I applied that. I just apply that to seemingly everything I do. So I was just analyzing this from all different angles about when to come out, how to come out, and my approach was going to be different to my partner at the time, who I was married to, versus my kids, and the implications of what my transition would mean to them. So because ultimately it's not just me transitioning, it's my family are transitioning with me, except this time they don't have any choice in the matter. So how they want to deal with it. So one of the biggest considerations I would say that I made was to take my transition as at their pace only, as slow as I possibly could, just to make sure that they were coming along with me. I didn't want to jump in and just, trying to get them to play catch up with me, just going off in all different directions and then just really don't know what's hit them. So I really was very methodical in how I approached it, because as I said, they're all individual people, and I just wanted to make sure that they were comfortable with each step as I went through that. And I had one-on-one conversations with every one of my family. So you may have noticed my accent's not from Canada. I'm originally from UK, London. So I've got an extended family in the UK as well. So including my dad. So as I mentioned, I'd lost my mother. So how was I going to approach that with my family over in the UK, and especially my dad? So that was a huge, huge consideration. And when I got to that of how to deal with him, I wanted to travel over there and speak to him face to face, because I couldn't do that over the phone. I was back and forth on whether to tell him, because I don't see him very often. But yeah, I've actually got a letter. I wrote a letter to him, a 5-page letter. So that was how I approached how I was going to, sort of face having to deal with my dad. So yeah. So anyway, it was kind of a lot of considerations even before I started telling people, and it was just something that I felt that I just needed to try and plan out. I mean, we try and do what we can with a certain amount of control if possible, but of course, once you start coming out to people, you can't untell them. So that would be after that. It's like, okay, well, the chips will have to fall where they may, and I'll just deal with that as we go along. So those were the main considerations for me about coming out to family, and certainly my extended family. I didn't go on face to face with everybody. I decided at that point that I was going to send letters to everybody, just to let them know, and regardless of their reactions, it's like, okay, they can deal with it or not. And yeah, so, but it was my immediate family that I spent the most time on. So that was probably 18 months, a 2-year process before I even came out at work. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so 18 months to 2 years to gradually come out to family, and so and I can hear the challenges of your mother, who was ill, and being in a different country also. So you were in Canada and they were in the UK.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, my mum had moved. My parents divorced when I was really young, so my mum had since remarried, and then she lost her husband. And then after that, I sponsored her to come to Canada. So she came to Canada then, and that's where she was living. So my dad was still living over there. He'd remarried, and yeah, so he had my sisters as well. So that was how our family was. So I just wanted to make sure, because we were so close, I wanted to make sure I sat down with them individually. Yeah.
And this letter sounded like it was a very, that must have been a tough letter to write to your father.
It really, really was. Yeah. If you like, I can just read you a couple of excerpts from it.
Yeah, that would be great.
That would, okay. Okay, I just want to say, dear Dad, yeah, these are just some excerpts, as I said, from it. So what I discovered and want to tell you is that I'm transgender. So it's probably the hardest letter I've ever had to write, but I'm writing because I have something very important I want to tell you. So, and I had to sort of say up front, don't get worried. I'm fine as far as my health, because, but I want to tell you, I just hope that you can feel the same about me, as I love you so much and couldn't bear not having you in my life. Please don't feel disappointed or ashamed of me. Hiding my struggle with these years was something I had to do because my fear of rejection by those I love the most, including you, should this part of me ever be discovered. I also needed to try and figure out why I was so different from all the other boys. I had always believed there must be something wrong with me to be feeling like this, so consequently I carried a deep sense of shame at being this way for much of my life. All too often, people like me who don't find the support they need can become severely depressed, lose hope, and sadly decide that suicide is the only way out. I was very lucky to have found that critical support and never had to endure such despair, and I'm thankful for that every day of my life. Some of my friends were not so lucky. Dad, I want you to know that I'm very much at ease now and comfortable with who I am and where I'm going. Growing up as I did and the life I've had as your son has been one I've been very proud of, and that experience will always be a part of me, as well as those wonderful memories you and I have shared over the years. This is simply the next phase of my life, and I hope you still want to be part of. So I knew telling you that will be the biggest challenge, simply because your acceptance and understanding is more important to me than anything else in the world. So the consequences of not being able to accept me are unthinkable. So Dad, please know I've agonized for months on whether I should tell you or not. But given that we live so far away, but while the thought of pretending to be the son you've always known might have kept things as they were for you, I couldn't bear the thought of lying to you about who I am and the life I will be living. So,
Wow.
said and just to finish off there, I just said, I don't want you to feel any blame for this, as being trans is something I was born with. I know you have loved me more than any parent could love their son, and I'll never forget that. You've always been there for me. We had so much fun together, and that's why I love you so much. One thing I can promise you is that I'm still the same person I always was, and that will never change. The person you've always known is still there, just in a different package. I'm so sorry if this causes you any pain or sadness, and I've prayed so hard that it doesn't. But I know you're only human, and likely this will be something you'll need time to adjust to. Please don't feel embarrassed or ashamed of me, because I only want to be happy and finally be at peace with myself. I'm truly sorry, and I wish I could have been the son you always wanted, but I've done my best to make you proud of me, and truly hope you can accept and still be proud of me as you always were. I love you, Dad, and always will.
Wow.
So that was the thing with that. One of the things I wanted my dad to sort of understand, that I wasn't closing the door on all the memories that we shared as a family. That was just something I felt that was really important to him, because we had so much fun, when I was growing up. Even though I was still struggling with my gender, I was just trying to put on a brave face. But and there was, several years where I could just close the door on that for a while and just try and get on with living my life. But I didn't want that to take any of those memories away from him. So that was where I was very conscious of when I was writing that letter. So, but thankfully he was very, very supportive, and he just looked at me with tears in his eyes, and he said, "I still love you. You're my daughter." And that was just, just amazing. It really, really was.
It's hugely powerful. I mean, for you to write that letter, it must have taken you a very long time to agonize over how to write that letter.
It really did. It took me about 2 months actually to sit and organize my thoughts. I had a draft to start with, and I just kind of worked on it and some of the things. And yeah, it was just, again, when you look at the initial question about the considerations in coming out to your family, I was just looking at all the types of relationships I had with each of my family members, and be able to sort of say, okay, well, I know I need to do this for my dad, and especially because I'm not around him every day, and we only see each other maybe once a year or once every 2 years. So that's how I approached it, and I just felt, because I knew if I just went over and sat with him, I'd never get the words out properly, and it just could make a big difference of whether or not you could accept me or not. So that was my approach I made. Yeah.
I want to throw it out to others. I see Maureen has just said, thank you so much for sharing your letter with us. You're very courageous. Yeah, courage definitely comes up. You know, the other thing is that what I really heard too, as a parent and as a parent of a trans child, is that you were really intentional about saying this had nothing to do with you as a parent. There was no blame, there was no shame, and being really clear about that.
Yeah.
And so that he could hear that this was your journey and nothing to do with him.
Yeah, absolutely is, because when I came out to my mum before she passed away. She never got to meet me as Stephanie, unfortunately. But when I had that conversation, where she actually asked me, "Was it my fault?" and I just said, "Mum, you know, it wasn't at all." I said, "This is just unfortunate how things happen, and this is what I was dealt, and I'm just doing the best I can to deal with that."
Yeah, you know, that's such an interesting question, and I'd like to hear from others, but this question, is it my fault, as though there is something wrong, right? As though somehow you identifying an authentic gender identity that's different from the one you were born in is somehow a fault, and something went wrong, and likely the parent is taking responsibility or accountability, right? And so that is that's curious, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you know, natural, or I think it would be a very common reaction.
I think,
And
I was just going to say, 'cause I think my mum was concerned that because she brought us up by herself, my brother and I, because we didn't have my father around at the time. I think she just would worry that, you know, maybe the way she brought us up had some effect on me. And I just said, "No, Mum," I said, "it was nothing to do with you in that respect." I said, "This was just how I was." So, yeah.
Does anyone have any comments? Anyone care to make a comment about what Steph has shared, or ask her anything about, you know, what she has just shared?
I wish you would publish that in your book. That's a wonderful letter, and it would be a great guideline for other people who have a similar situation. Lovely letter.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And so we'll come back to you. You know, we talk about extended families and how you know that required something different, and so we're going to come back to you. Oh, Maureen, yes.
Hi, sorry. Yeah, I was just kind of going to make a comment, because I'm here because of my grandchild coming out very early, and the way that this generation is we understand that this is not anything to do with shame, and it wasn't anybody's fault. But I think it's the older generations that they do unfortunately feel that because of the stigma.
Yeah.
And I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. And again, I just think you're so courageous. And
Thank you, Maureen, for saying that. Yeah, I mean, being older as well, you know, we didn't have the luxury of the internet to even know there was others like me out there. So that isolation was very, very real, you know. And when you start to sort of question what's wrong with me, why am I different, that part of it. But had I had the internet around, certainly like the younger generation do today, they can just go online and realize very, very quickly that they're not alone in many cases. So I think, you know, I didn't have that. I had that available to me at the time. But so I think that's why we tend to sort of struggle with that, and through the isolation that we had then. Yeah.
Thank you. So at this point, I'd like to go to Joe and hear from Joe about what your key considerations were in coming out to family.
My story is a little bit different than Stephanie's, because as I was growing up, I identified as a lesbian for most of my life, before I began my transition. And I came out as a lesbian in the late 70s, early 80s. I come from a blended family. I have my father, my stepmother, and I have step brothers and sisters. Unfortunately, though, my family we weren't tight. We weren't close at all. My father passed away when I was 18. And actually 19, I had moved out of the house when I was 18. And a lot of that had just because of the way my family was, it wasn't a very healthy relationship. So when I came to terms with being trans, it was a very dark place for me. I didn't have much support in the LGBT community. There's a lot of still discrimination and ignorance even in our own LGBT community about trans people. They were looked down upon, they were scorned, they were viewed as freaks. And if I came out as trans, that meant I was one of them, and I didn't want that. So I was in a very dark place. And to the point, as Stephanie alluded to, that many people in our community do commit suicide. And I actually considered ending my life. The thing that stopped me and wanted me to go forward was the fact that I have a son. I was in a long-term relationship with another woman. We have a child together. My son was about 10 when I came to terms with this. And so I had to find a way to speak my truth. I had to find a way to let him know what I was experiencing without scaring him. And yet being my authentic self. I had talked to friends, coworkers that I trusted about how do I do this? How do I talk to my son and let him know that I need to transition and what I'm going through? So one day, my son's a gamer. He likes to do the whole gaming thing. And I noticed that he was flipping back and forth with his characters. And it was irrelevant to him about the characters he was choosing, whether it was male or female. And I noticed he just liked the character, and he liked the avatars that he was playing with. So one of the best pieces of advice a friend of mine ever gave me was that when your children ask you a question, take the time to answer it when they ask you. Don't put it off. Don't avoid it. Ask it then, but use age-appropriate language. So for me, my son was the key. And I was going through a divorce with his mother. So that was challenging, but we made sure that the three of us were together when we told him. And I said to him that the language was the very thing I worried about the most. So I said to him, I said, buddy, this avatar that I live in doesn't match my head or my heart. And I said, and the doctors are going to help change, the doctor's going to help me change that. And they're going to help me do that by taking testosterone. It was great because at the time my son was going through sex education for grade 6 at school. So were already talking about hormones and the impacts that they were having. So basically Johnny and I were going through puberty at the same time. So we were able to share our stories together. But when I told him about transitioning, at one point he got very emotional. He got teary-eyed. His mother said, see, he can't do this. He can't handle this. I go, yes, he can. Just wait. So when she left, we had our own private conversation. I said, buddy, can you tell me why you were crying? Or like, what was upsetting you? And he said, I just don't want to lose Muta. And that was the name he called me. He had 2 moms. He called me Muta, and his other mom, he called Mommy. And I said, buddy, you're never going to lose me. I'm still here. I said, you just have to look into my eyes. I'm still here. I said, I'm still going to rag on you about picking up your clothes off the floor. I'm still going to rag on you about doing your homework and doing all those things. I'm still here. It's just the body I live in is going to change. So it's been pretty good. I've been very blessed. My son was very accepting. It took some time for him to call me dad, but that was okay. I waited until he was ready. And it was mostly when other people saw me as the man that I am, that he just said, you know, I think we're gonna start calling you Dad if you're all right with that. And I said, buddy, whenever you're ready, I'm okay with that. So that was that. My other family members, because I'm not very close, I did either email them, and actually I even text them because that's how we were usually communicating with one another. Some of them have chosen to no longer have anything to do with me as a result of that. And that's okay. It wasn't a very healthy relationship to begin with. If they can't accept who I am, then you know what? I can't have them in my life because it's just too short, as Stephanie alluded to as well. I do have people who are not blood related, who I call my earth. I have an aunt who I'm close to, who's been through, we're related through marriage through my stepmother. And I often call her my earth mother. And that side of the family has been very accepting, and we aren't even blood related, which absolutely astounds me because they have been so supportive, and yet my own blood family couldn't accept it and have decided not to have anything to do with me. So that's a different perspective from what Stephanie did, but my son was the key. If I had lost him, I don't know what that would have done to me. I don't know if I'd still be here, to be quite honest with you. And I don't mean to be so dark, but that's how impactful it is when you're trying to come to terms with this and trying to share it with your family members, because you want to be with the people you love. And my son is my greatest joy.
Thank you, Joe. That's yeah. Susie's clapping. That's just I feel like I just need to take a moment after that story.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean you've landed a few things. You've landed the as did Stephanie, the absolute utmost importance of having family support. And it was, and clearly it's unequivocal when you communicated how it was for you, how it was, particularly with your son. I mean, that's.
Well, it's been interesting with him. I wanted to make sure he was safe. And so what I did is I called the school, and when his mom and I were going at the beginning of our divorce, I let the school know that, just so you know, we were separating and we were going through a divorce, and I just wanted to let the school know so that if they noticed any different behaviors with Jonathan, that they would let me know. And then with the transition, I reached out to them as well, and I said, hey, sorry to tell you, but there's some other stuff going on in Johnny's world, and this is what's happening. They were very supportive. Thankfully, in the schools these days, they talk about different families and they talk about different people, and that was great. They were incredibly supportive. And then Jonathan decided to tell some of his friends. And it was like, oh boy, here we go. Hang on. It was quite the ride. I was very concerned about one of his best friends who is Muslim. And it was only because of I had a previous experience dealing with somebody who was Muslim, and how they were very supportive of a different type of family. So with my son, I was concerned that he was going to lose his best friends as a result of this. And the conversation I had with Jonathan about transitioning, the avatar, going through hormones and going through puberty the second time around, he actually shared that with his friends. They didn't skip a beat. I was blown away by how supportive his friends were. Literally the next day after he told his buddies, the next time they saw me, they referred to me as Joe. They didn't skip a beat. It was incredible. And it was like, okay, you just told your friend, how did you do this? What came up? Why did you do that? And he says, well, he's always helped me make another Mother's Day card because I have to do two. He said, but I told them I was spending time with my dad. And they all looked at him and go, your dad? I thought you had a sperm donor. Who's this dad? And so Jonathan says, well, do you know what transitioning is all about? Mooch is transitioning female to male, and he's taking hormones, and he's now going by the name of Joe. It was that easy, that simple, and it was a no-brainer. It was incredible. I was blown away. And I'm so thankful because they were there for him. And he had his support of his buddies. And I keep checking on him. That's been 5 years ago. And I check on him still to this day. Does anybody give you a hard time about your dad being trans? He goes, no, it's not a big deal, Dad. We've got people in our class who are trans. It's not a big deal. It's like, okay, sorry.
Wow. Amazing. Thank you, Joe, for that. I mean, that is a hugely enlightening story. It's a story about joy, really. I mean, you know, you present both the yin and the yang of this experience. No experience is clearly, you know, singular, but there is huge dark and light in your story. That on the one hand, there are family members that no longer wanted you in their life, which must have been really hurtful, you know, even from a philosophical point of view, if not from a relationship point of view. And then you have your son who brings such simplicity of acceptance in his family and his with his friends. I mean, that's wow. Anyone care to ask Joe a question or make a comment about what Joe has just shared?
That story needs to be in your book too, Suzanne.
Yeah, you know what comes to me is that every single transition, every single person who has identified in a way that is not birth identity has a story to tell, and every story will be different, right? And how we, you know, how we go through that is everything. I know that actually in my book, when I was beginning to do research on this, I read the research. The research is really clear that family support is absolutely key to mental health.
Oh, yes.
And then ultimately physical health. Right. Yeah. Yes.
Well, you know, Suzanne, the important thing is that you can have a new family. So if the birth family doesn't get on board, you can create a new one. Sounds like some of you have.
Yes, and as Ray says, chosen families are often more supportive. Yes, and that is what, well, you know, yes, that's definitely what you've both identified. Yeah, I really, I love the comment that you made, Joe, about your son, that story about the avatar. I mean, that's really speaking into his listening, and about how your avatar doesn't match your heart and head. I mean, that's just so clever. He can understand that. We can understand that. And there it is. Nothing is wrong. It just doesn't match. So get one that matches. It's that simple. If only everybody could figure that out, that it's that simple, right?
Yeah. Like I said, one of the best pieces of advice I got was a friend telling me, you know, to use the language that my son would understand. And I really kept that in mind, right? Because he was 10 at the time. And it made the world a difference. And then, of course, both of us going through puberty at the same time, you know, we compare our man hairs together all the time, or, you know, I'd pick him up from his mother's and I'd look at him and I'd give this grin to him and go, man, I hate you, because his facial hair was coming in better than mine was, right? And he'd just be beaming, real proud, like, because he's got so much more facial hair than me. So it actually, I would say it brought us closer together. And because we've experienced puberty together at the same time, and we've had that open dialogue. I'm very fortunate because Johnny and I, from day one, I always let him know who he was and where he came from. And I am, Stephanie can attest to this, I'm not very much of a morning person. And God bless him, he would ask me questions before I've had that morning coffee. And it would be, okay, yeah, I guess we're going to be late for school today because we got to talk this one out. And I'm glad I did, because it was very, I learned early that people can be very unkind sometimes. And one of the, when he was in grade 2, somebody from grade 4 came up to him and said, you know, who's your dad? And Johnny said, I don't have a dad. I have a sperm donor. And the kid argued with him, said, no, you can't be born unless you have a dad. And he said, yes, I can. My mom went to the doctor's office and gave her sperm, and that's how I came to be. So the language enabled him to fight back, to advocate for himself that, yes, he can be here without having a dad. And this is why, because he had the language. And as he's grown, that language obviously has evolved. And then I kept that in mind when it came to transitioning, that I had to find a way to relate to him in a manner that he could understand. And I've been blessed. I truly have been blessed with it.
Yeah. If I can just add there, certainly, yeah, I think as what I said earlier about, you know, they're all individual people, and how you approach it, as I said, as Joe said, like using the language that they better understand. I mean, with my 3 kids, I've got 2 daughters and a son, and I mean, they're very, very different. And so I knew my approach would have to be very individual for what, you know, what I felt that they could deal with, and how I was going to share that information with them. But I came out to my kids around, they were about 11 years old at the time. So I really was kind of anxious, because I said to my ex at the time, I just said, look, I want to have the conversation with them before they hit their teens, because kids have got enough things to deal with when they're a teenager, let alone having to deal with, you know, a trans parent. So anyway, we went back and forth on this for a couple of years, and finally we got to the point where, okay, then I can tell them. So that's what I did. But because they're only 11, again, I had to approach it in such a way that back then I wasn't planning to transition full time. So it was a case of just letting them know about me being transgender and what that meant. So at a young age, it was literally about playing dress up for a while until the kids got a little bit older. Then I'd give them a little bit more information as well. And one of my 2 daughters who seemed to be very interested, so she became my closest confidant, and she was always asking me questions about it. And the other 2, they said, no, we know we don't need to have that conversation. But I would check in with them periodically with them and just say, are you doing okay? Have you had any, just like Joe did with his son, anybody like teasing you at school or anything like that? And because when I first came out to them, I'd mentioned, I think, that don't tell your friends. I said, and not because it's something to be ashamed of. I said, I just don't want you to get bullied at school. So that was a consideration, again, being protective of my kids too. And I also didn't go out dressed in the neighborhood or in my town, because I didn't want any of their friends seeing me, where they could end up teasing my kids at school. So I was very, very conscious about that, making sure that they stayed safe. So most of my, when I was dressing and going out, was in the Toronto area. So I just make sure that, yeah. So that was the big consideration for several years there. Once as I said, I was not full time at that time, but I was going out sort of maybe once a month or maybe twice a month, just to sort of, because I just needed that release to be able to be my authentic self. And coming out to my wife as well. She again, she was very supportive, but I think, I know she had her limits about, well, what does this mean? You know, so, and like, you know, are you going to have going to change your gender and stuff like that? And at the time I said no, because that was the truth. I really had no intention of that. But that's kind of how things went along until I told you earlier that with my loss of my mum and how things changed with me and where I needed to go after that. So, but one of the key things, again, as part of getting back to the consideration piece, was just what I would say to my kids, or what kind of language I would, you know, that we could be using. And one thing, because I was so guilty, I felt so guilty about transitioning and upsetting everybody's lives. not guilty about the transition, but what the effect it would have on them. That was something I struggled with for a couple of years afterwards as well. So one of the things I thought long and hard about was that I said to my kids, well, you can still call me dad. So I said, but I do hope that you can use dad and the pronoun she in the same sentence. So like, you know, I'm seeing my dad, she's coming over, or she's taking us out, whatever. So they gradually got used to that. And of course they had to deal with the questions. Well, what do you mean she? Well, yeah, my dad's trans. When they started getting a bit more comfortable with that. And it was, so that was part of it, just having to get used to that. And I just didn't want to take that away from them. I felt bad enough of transitioning and them losing the father figure that they'd had. But they understood, and they needed, you know, so I think that's really helped them to be able to sort of still call me, and they still use it at home. I just don't say it out loud when we're out in public, because people wouldn't understand. That's just something between us. And I said, the important thing is dad is just a role. Okay, you've got a mum and a dad, they're just a role. So it doesn't equate to being male or female. That's the difference in our family. So that's how I explained it to them. And they totally got it. So yeah, so that part of it was a sort of ongoing challenge at first, but they've done very, very well. And I'm really proud to say that they've been very, very supportive and being like great kids. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And it is interesting to hear how each of your three kids responded a little bit differently. I mean, of course, they're different. Great that it feels like your daughter was more of an ally for you, an active ally.
Yeah, she was, because I got her, she wanted to join me because we did some activism as well as time went on, and we did down at marches and parades and stuff like that we took part in once I got really comfortable being out. And both my daughters came down with me, joined me for that, and as allies. So that just meant the world to me. It really, really did. So, and this was all before I got to my point of transitioning at work. So I was keeping this part of me still away from my workplace. But yeah, so that really empowered me. And also they got to see the trans community up close, and the kind of people that became friends, and they've made a lot of friends in the community as well over the years too. So that's been good.
I wonder if there's anyone who I'm going to move on to the next question, but I'm wondering if there's anyone who has something to say. I know that Ray has put in the chat, it's so sad that you felt guilty about everyone else, and
yeah,
that's
It's a reality though, you know, because as Stephanie was talking about it earlier, it not only are you transitioning, but the people around you are transitioning as well, and they don't really have that choice. And you really feel like you're putting a burden on them when you're coming to terms with your own identity. And there's a lot of guilt with that, and even shame, I would say, as well.
Yeah. So I chose to go into counseling for about a year and a half to deal with the guilt, as well as just reconciling my feelings about wanting to transition full time. But it was the guilt part of it that was the biggest challenge, to get over that and realize, you know, they said, well, you've been a good parent now, so you've done everything you possibly could as a parent. That was very reaffirming. But there's still a little part of me that still carry that around when I look at how their lives could have been had I stayed the same. But each one of them have told me that, you know, would they really want me to be unhappy? None of them did. So they were quite happy to see me do what I needed to do, to see me as a happier person and happier parent for them too. So.
To this next question, I think you've both really talked about what's challenging, but the question, what did you want them to hear? That's a really interesting question, and I want you both to answer it. I'll tell you what I've heard so far and what you have said, and also in what Skylar, my son, has said, and what others have said, is that is that I am the same person. I'm the same person, whether I'm expressing as male or expressing as female or expressing somewhere on the gender spectrum. I'm the same person. I believe the same things. I'm still good at the same things. I'm still bad at the same things. I still laugh at the same things. I still hate the same food. And I think that was a key message that has come to me, and both of you have said that also. Joe, what would you say is one of the key things, or some of the key things that you wanted your son and others to hear?
You hit the nail on the head, is the fact that I'm still here. It's this container I walk in that changes. That's it.
Mhm.
But I'll even say, I didn't realize it, and I think Stephanie and I, we've had other conversations, but I didn't realize what a burden I was carrying. And I've had some friends who called me an angry lesbian. And I remember going to one of my best friends and saying to her, "Am I an angry lesbian?" She goes, "Oh yeah, you were an angry lesbian." And it was because I was so unhappy.
Mm.
And I just didn't realize until I had transitioned how unhappy I was and what a burden that was. Like the sense of freedom that I could finally breathe in my own skin, and the reflection I see in the mirror is who I am. I can finally see my reflection, is just such a sense of freedom. It's hard to articulate it. But it was such a burden until you finally have it out. And for my son, when it comes to, what is number one, I love you. Nothing's changing. Like your mom and I still are going to work through this crap with the divorce that we had, but we will still be here for you no matter what. And when he got emotional, it was like, buddy, I'm still here. You just have to look at my eyes, because that's the one thing that doesn't change when you do a transition, is that the eyes in your smile, that still stays there. And that was it for me, right? And he was okay. And even with what Stephanie was saying about calling me dad, we were out in public, and I noticed a family German speaking German behind me, and I went, "Ooh, this is uncomfortable," because Jonathan still called me Mutter, which means mother in German. And I said, "Buddy," I said, "there's a German family over there." I said, "Maybe, do you think you could call me dad?" He goes, "Yeah." So he tried it out. And of course, he would mess up and he would be upset. "Oh, I'm so sorry." And he'd go, "Buddy, it's okay. It's not uncommon for a kid to say mom when they mean dad, or dad when they mean mom. It's okay. It's all right." But it was shortly thereafter, he says, "People see you as a man." He goes, I want to call you dad." So that was, it was up to him getting to that point, and I was okay, like Stephanie was, to let them have that time and that space to get there. But for me, it was just, wanting to reassure him that I love him. I still am going to be me, and nothing has changed in that matter.
Oh, great. Thank you. Steph, what about for you? What were your key messages that you wanted people to hear?
Well, I think I could certainly echo much of what Joe had said as well. But yeah, when I actually had the first major conversation with each of my kids, we went on a family trip to Quebec. So I rented a cottage on a beautiful lake, and so we had a little paddle boat. So I decided ahead of time that I'm going to take each one of them out separately on the boat, and we literally went out to the middle of the lake and just floated there for a while, and we just talked. And I just wanted them to have completely focused as much as possible on what I was about to talk to them about it. So it was primarily the main message for me was just to let them know that how much I've struggled with this decision, and even though I hadn't made a decision at that point, because so much of my next step was going to be based upon whether I had the support of them or not, those closest to me. Because like Joe said, without their support, I wouldn't be here where I am today. But having that conversation with them, and one of the first things, my first daughter I spoke to, she said, "Well, you know, it's about time. You know, she kind of could see things moving that way, I think. But I just said, well, the main thing I want to just tell you is that I'm still going to be your dad. I'm still going to be the same person, and all the other things that you have expected or of me as a parent, but none of that's going to change. I said the only thing again was I'm going to look different, and you know, when you talk about me to other people, just using a different name, that's all. So that was, and just helping them understand that, you know, that I was going to be there for them regardless of what happens, and whether people could accept me or not. But just being there for my kids, that was the biggest thing for me. And so I wanted them to hear that, and I wanted them to know that that wasn't going to change. So after I had that conversation with my first daughter, I then went back, and then the next day I went out with my second daughter, and and we had the same conversation, and I said the same thing to her as well. And I mean, the first thing she said to me was, "Well, I was wondering when you're going to come over to our side." That was her comment there, which I thought was kind of cute. But it was just like, yeah, because and she said to me, "It doesn't matter." She said, you know, because I mentioned about the guilt and everything else, because that was something I've been struggling with. And she said, you know what, I just want you to be happy. That's all. You know, whatever you are, I still love you the same. Still my dad, and I just want you to be happy. And that was the message I got from them. And so that was something I just felt so, like, you know, happy and relieved that at least I would have the support. So even if everybody else in my life said they can't deal with me, I don't want me around anymore, or be part of my life, then I still had two of the most important people in my life. So that was there. And I tried to get my son to come out, but typical boy, he was just happy just to sit and watch play his video games. But I did tell him, and when we had that conversation, yeah, he's being a boy. Yeah, he was a lot different. He said, I don't know how I'm going to deal with this. And I just said, well, what do you mean? So he just said to me, well, it's all going to be so different. But I said, do you mean that you're not going to, you don't feel like you can have a relationship with me anymore? And he just said, I don't know. So I need to think about it. So I just left it there. And so I checked in again with him about, before we finished the conversation, I said to him, I said, well, just please understand that I'm still going to have to go through whether you are able to support me or not. And I just left it there. And I left it probably about 2 months. And then when I had another conversation with him again, and he was like night and day. He was so supportive and made a big difference to me. And one of the biggest concerns he had was losing his friends. He's got two really close buddies of his, and I spoke to them individually when they came to visit about it, and they just said, you know, same thing. Well, why would we not want to be friends with him anymore? He's a pretty cool dude, and you know, said, so what? You know, and I think once he realized that he wasn't going to lose his friends, that completely changed his view. Wow. That he was just able to be a lot more supportive, and right now, yeah, whenever I still check in with all of them every now and again, and just to say, you know, have you heard any transphobic negative comments and stuff about me at all? And they just said no. And I mean, they're good now at standing up and said, you know, if they were to do that, they can stand up for themselves. And I check in with my son, and that was just literally, I think, about a week and a half ago, and no concerns at all with him as well. So he's still, you know, whenever he's out driving in his car or something, before he got his new car there, he was just, something would go wrong, he'd call me and just, you know, just, what do I do? What do I do? So he still sees me in that sort of father role, which is great. And that's so, even though I'm not sort of, you know, one of these people that would, at least not now anyway, wanted to just tinker with cars all the time. But I did back in the day. And so at least he knows he's got that support if he needs it for stuff like that. But it's just typical things. And if he gets any deep questions, or really, he said, I can ask you, or I'll ask my sisters, they'll tell me. So they're very close. So they do talk to each other, which is good as well. But yeah.
So great. I know that Joe talked about his son, you know, from Muta to dad, and that moment. And so Steph, was there any difficulty that each of your three kids had in making the transition from dad to mom? And do they call you mom?
No, no, I said to them early on because they've got a mum. So I couldn't pretend that, I wanted to take that role. So as much as, I mean, if they didn't have a mum, then absolutely I would have, a mum around anymore, then I would have just said, yeah, okay. But no, I didn't want to sort of, I mean, because I'm still on good terms with my ex as well. So we're still very close. And so I just left that alone. I thought about, being mum too, or something like that. But I just wanted to really left it to them to sort of, you tell me what's most comfortable for you. And I'm okay with that. I can accept that, because to me, that was kind of a sort of a concession, I guess, really, for upsetting their lives. A small but important one for them. So that was kind of my thinking at the time. Yeah. So they just, but sometimes when I go out shopping with my daughters or daughter, one, we've gone into a store and somebody says, oh, thought that we were mum and daughter, so, and she never skips a beat, never says, oh, it's not my mum or anything like that. So I get such a kick out of that.
What do they call you?
No, if like we had a couple of times, we've had people in stores just say, oh, your daughter looks very much like a mom, saying to me, saying that kind of thing, and can I help you or whatever it is like that. So, and my daughter has said, is kind of never corrects them. So as far as she's concerned, yeah, I can be their mum when we're out,
Right.
but I don't sort of take that officially.
Right.
Otherwise, so yeah.
And so do they call you by name? By
No,
Stephanie?
they still call me my dad or Steph.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, sometimes.
Got it. Got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any comments? We're going to go to there's one final question I see that hold on, what was this question? Any words of wisdom? So there's two questions. Any words of wisdom that you have for others? And there's also one other that it's this, oh no, hold on. No. Oh, hold on. I've lost it. It was about right. Oh, any regrets? I thought I included that. Any regrets? But I'm sorry. I'm changing that. I apologize. If you would answer that, any words of wisdom for others that you would like to pass on, and or any regrets that you have, anything that you would do differently. I don't know. Joe, anything that you would do differently?
Oh, I wish I would have done this sooner. I can tell you that much. But I don't know. I don't have any regrets. Like I said earlier, I felt like I was carrying a burden, and when I was finally able to be myself, I didn't realize the freedom that I have and how happier I am. I had read stories about people being so much happier when they go through this transition, but when you're going through it, you don't think you're ever going to get there. Right. But when I do feel now that I'm through the hard part, and I'm just finally enjoying life like I've never enjoyed it before. So that's a good thing. So I have no regrets. If my regrets are with other people in my world, that for example, my ex, she did not take my transition well. She struggled with it, and I think she still struggles with it. The regret is that we couldn't have had a good relationship like Stephanie has with hers. I wish we would have had that. I would have liked to have been able to talk it out with her to maybe help her understand. But I do believe that my transition was very difficult for her, and for many reasons, but I couldn't articulate exactly what. but I know she had a difficult time with it, and I regret that we couldn't talk that out.
Okay. Thank you, Steph. Any
Yeah.
liquids or any things you do differently?
Well, I think if any words of wisdom for others preparing, I think yeah, it's just to realize that everybody is different, and they're going to react in their own way, and you got no control over that. So I would just say be prepared for anything, and just be prepared to have the conversations and answer questions, and also more importantly, give them time to adjust to it and come around, because that's what I did with my family. You know, sometimes when I think if I could sit down with my younger self and have that conversation, you know, what would I do differently, or about how would I prepare myself, my younger self, for the challenge of coming out to family. It's just like, do it as soon as you can. I said, don't wait, because being your authentic self, I just, as Joe would say too, I mean, yeah, I regret that I didn't come out earlier. You know, certainly much younger, but I wasn't blessed with the knowledge or the resources I had back then to make that even possible. So, but I'm happy now, at least that's where I am now. But yeah, I'd just say, like, be prepared for the conversations, and but don't wait. As I said, you know, you need to, so, and with family, and realize you have no control over how people are going to react. You know, if it's coming from a place of love, I mean, if you've got a good relationship with that person, that's going to make all the difference in the world. If you have a really strained relationship with somebody, then don't be surprised if it doesn't go well. So the best thing, as I said, I always approach everything very, as I said, individually, and just have to prepare myself. Okay, this I hope it goes this way, but if it doesn't, then so be it. You know, it's part of the process. So yeah. So yes, it's just, so for anybody who's listening to somebody who's coming out to them, yeah, just the best advice I can give you is just be supportive. You don't have to understand what's going on, but just be supportive. And I'm not kidding. I can't tell you the value of just having a friendly person or friendly ear of somebody who's there for you, as well, to help you through that time, because there's going to be times, you know, you feel totally isolated. And I certainly spent many evenings just crying my eyes out about, you know, throughout all of this, with the way things were with my family, and what you know, my goodness, what I'd done, and how my whole family's lives have been turned upside down because of it. So that part of it, yeah, you can't really prepare all the time for that kind of thing. It's just a natural reaction. So I would say, yeah, be prepared for the wave of emotions that you'll have to deal with along the way, as well. Yeah.
It sounds like you carried a lot of guilt, Stephanie, for you, on behalf of your family.
I did, yeah. But,
Yeah.
but certainly looking back now, you know, it's, yeah, I mean, it's because I love them all, and I care so much for everybody that those who mean most to me in my life. That's why, I mean, certainly for others, I mean, I had a very, very close friend, which I lost along the way. Him and I used to do all kinds of things together, and you know, from going out bike rides and weekends away and all the fun stuff, camping and stuff we used to do. That just went away after I told him, and that I wasn't prepared for that. But you just never know where it's going to come from, and as Joe probably can attest to, I mean, sometimes where the support where you least expect it. So there's a lot of, it can be, some of the positives can hopefully outweigh the negatives as you go through this process. You know, but you certainly can't choose your family. But yeah, if you've got a good close family and are fortunate with that, I think you can certainly make it work, and hopefully everybody be there to support you along the way. So yeah.
Yeah, Stephanie, you know, like when you talk about, you know, the guilt and everything else, and worrying about the people around you, you really do try to make it very comfortable for the people around you, right? Because you do carry so much guilt and shame with it all. And I can honestly tell you that for me, one of the things that I consciously did was I literally consciously every day focused on something good to get me through those difficult days. And it was even as simple as feeling the sun on my face. I just would focus on those things that were good. And the other part was is that if I have 5 people being supportive of me, why am I worrying about that one person that's being so negative?
Yeah.
And I stopped putting my energy on that one person. And I started to focus more on those 5 people that were there for me. And it made a world of difference, because then I started to focus on the positive things that were working. And that helped my mental health, that helped my overall well-being, so that every day I had a better reason to get up.
Yeah, I can't stress how important that is as well, Joe. Just because, yeah, if we get drowned out by the negative all the time, it's very, very it's sort of draining on us as well. And it's just looking for the positive in everything. You know, even if somebody can't accept me, it's just like, okay, well, I need to think about it. I see that as a positive. I mean, it's not an outright rejection at that point, but it's really something that they need to think about. So it's like, okay, and then they may come back a couple of months later and then say, you know, I'm okay, I'm going to be there for you. So that's, again, a positive. But if somebody says otherwise, then it's just like, okay, I won't just chase that person, I'll just leave it. And if if they want to contact me later on, even a year down the road, and that's happened. I've had 1 or 2 people who've reached out after a year or more, after I told them, where they just want to pick up again as friends. And so I said, okay, you know, that's fine. But I just want to hear, I don't want to be, you know, hear negative things about it. And if you're negative, then I would prefer just to cut loose and then surround myself with positive people. So
Because we're going through enough.
I
We're
know.
going through enough, right?
Yeah.
And I can't fix it for everybody. And
No.
yeah, because you can drown in it. You can literally drown in that negativity, right? So
Yeah,
I
exactly.
agree.
I have, there is a question that Maureen has asked. What advice can you give to a 10-year-old who came out at 3 years old?
Wow, bravery. That's kudos, man. I wish I could have come
Yeah.
out. Like I remember at 9 trying to express to my family that I was different. And it wasn't very well received or accepted, for that matter. And that kept me in the closet, thinking there was something wrong with me for many, many years, and trying to overcome that. I don't know. I don't know what I'd say to a 10-year-old who's come out to somebody that's 3. Steph, I'm
Yeah.
going to put that out to you.
No, I was just like, so somebody that came out at 3, did you say that 3 years old?
Maureen, do you want to step in and ask your question?
Sorry, yeah. Yeah, my grandchild came to me at
3 or 10?
3. She's 10 now.
Oh, okay.
But she came to me at 3 years old and said, Nana, I'm done pretending. And I went, what do you mean pretending? What are you pretending about? You're 3 years old. And Mason at the time says, I'm not really a boy, I'm really a girl. And I said, oh, okay. I wanted to try and get inside his head and figure out what was going on. So I started, the investigative journalist in me started asking him all these questions. And he had everything thought out. He was not a, what was he born again? He was born a he. I can't even remember anymore. So she kept saying to me, she was born a he. Like I'm asking her, being a him, questions. And she had all the answers in her head. She's always been a girl. And I asked her what her name would be, and she had a name picked out, and already knew what to do with what was between her legs.
Wow.
Yeah, it was incredible. So we're an incredibly supportive family, and they're, other than my ex-husband's side, they think that she's going to change when she hits puberty.
Yeah.
So but my concern is, I know that we have to start the transition, because that's all she wants. And she knows that. And I'm afraid that if her voice starts to change before we get it done, that's gonna kill her. And that's my most, I'm afraid of that the most.
Well, sorry, I was just gonna say, I know they can put, with the consent of parents, that they can go on hormone blockers
I
until,
understand that. What age does that happen? And we don't even have a doctor. We know nothing. I know, like, I don't know what to do.
what city do you live in?
I'm in Pickering.
Okay, so you're out that way.
I would start maybe contacting PFLAG. They got Durham chapter there.
Yeah.
Yes,
And-
I met
Yeah.
through Suzanne. I met sorry,
Dr. Helma Seidel. Did you
No.
meet Helma? Who?
no, I have
Oh, Giselle Block.
Giselle. Yes,
Yes.
I know
right.
Giselle offered me assistance if I needed it, but I just wondered if you guys knew it of anybody. I don't know.
Sorry.
Because there's like a waiting list at Sick Kids. No, that's okay. That's all right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know what, and that's hard too, because I remember being on a waiting list before I had my surgery, and that was excruciating. I can't imagine being a child and going through that. I remember being 9 years old and telling my family I was a boy and that I wanted to start wearing boys' clothes. And my stepmother said to me, well, if you're going to wear boys' clothes, you can wear your brother's underwear. And as a 9-year-old, that really freaked me out. And it's like, that grossed me out and I couldn't go there. And so that shut that conversation down for many, many years, right? And ultimately, I never told my stepmother when I did my transition. She was in her 90s and she passed about 2 years into my transition, but we didn't have a healthy relationship. So I just let it go. But I don't know.
If I could just add, I mean, I think the key thing, first of all, I mean, like, is that kids, I mean, you say at 3 years old, I just kudos to her then that she felt that, because so young, because I knew from probably about maybe 6 or 7 that I was different. I didn't know how I was different or why I was different. I just knew that I was different. So, but of course I didn't have the resources back then. So I think being able to come out at 3 years old, it's a testament really to your family for one. And I think is just to have that support from the family. I mean, even though it could be a phase, it's unlikely, but I mean, especially so young, it's possible.
No way.
No, I know, that's what I'm saying. Most people would think it's a phase, but likely it's not.
Yeah, she's more of a girl than her sister is.
Yeah. So, and I think so. Just being supportive and encouraging her, I think that's the best you can be doing. But I think when you get to the point of speaking to medical professionals about the next steps, is definitely have somebody who's very versed in trans healthcare, because just going to a GP, I mean, they may not be comfortable prescribing anything and may not even understand about anything about this. So it's definitely, I would say that at the very least is have somebody who's used to dealing with trans youth as well.
That's what we're looking for. Thank you.
Yeah.
So just to put a cap on that, Maureen, I can put you in touch, of course, with Dr. Helma Seidel, who is the co-writer of the book, whose business it is to work with young people. So after this call or an email, I'll connect you to, and that would be the best thing. She will give you very, very expert advice and next steps.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Maureen, have you seen the show All That Jazz? No, I Am Jazz.
Actually, that was her first name, Jazz.
Oh wow.
Oh,
Yeah. And now she's Olivia, because she didn't really want to be Jazz anymore after she read the books, and she grew up a little and went, nah, I don't want to be. But yeah, she's they've read, my daughter-in-law has read all the books and the movie and everything with her.
That's good.
Yeah.
I mean,
She's already saving her pennies for boobs.
Yep.
She
You know
should
what?
have
it.
It's great. As I said, just let her be a kid as well. And
Oh, I know, but she's just so obsessed. I don't know why. I don't know what it is. She's just so obsessed with having a girl body. And that was another thing that we had said last time, Suzanne, we were, the last webinar or Zoominar was, oh, I just got craft. I got early onset dementia, I think. I just lost my thought.
Anyway, so I just want to point out that Ray has said that with the right HRT, hormone replacement therapy, she won't need top surgery.
At the front door.
And so,
Oh, that's
right.
great.
And so these, so thank you for that, Ray.
Thank
And
you.
so these are medical considerations that you can definitely discuss and move along. But having these considerations before puberty is really, really important one.
Well, thank you.
So it's 8 o'clock, and I'd like, for those of you who we're planning your night around this ending at 8, I would like to end this. I am happy to stay on and have a further discussion, but I do want to respect those who are planning their night to carry on and enjoy this beautiful sun. I would really like to thank Stephanie Howard and Joe Hart Day for their courage and openness and willing to be very public about their difficult, challenging, and courageous journeys. Thank you. Thank you for coming on. And thank you for everyone who has joined and participated in this conversation. As I mentioned, we are recording this and it will be on YouTube, but it will only be audio, not video. So no one will be revealed in their person, visual identity. I also want to say that every month we continue to have conversations. Some of the upcoming conversations will be about workplace. I saw that was mentioned about whether or not, how it was different. Whether someone got more or less pay as they transitioned. I think in September, I'm going to have many people on to talk about what happens in a workplace from male to female and female to male. And so that's one dialogue we're going to have. There's another dialogue that we're going to have about what happens in romantic relationships, because we heard actually 2 different stories of what happens in romantic relationships when one person transitions to another gender. So those are 2 just upcoming ones that I invite you to be part of. Any final comments before people leave? Any thoughts or comments? Oh, I do want to say also that I will actually be on. I will be speaking at Dawn Heights Church on Sunday, and Sharon Devine just. Hello, Sharon. Thank you for reminding me. I will be speaking at that church on Sunday. And actually on Friday, tomorrow, I'll be speaking at the Metropolitan United Church as well. So what's really wonderful is that groups are inviting me to speak, and this is all about grassroots information. And so that's why I would really, I thank you for being here. And my hope is that you share this, you share whether people buy my book or not, I mean, of course I'd love them to, but really it's about sharing in this information so that people are comfortable with it and feel safe with it and feel like Maureen's grandchild, that she can come out at 3 years old and just say, this is how it is for me. And where people like Joe's son can say, it's easy as this, pass the salt, it's all good, right? And that's where we really want to get to. And where, Stephanie's one daughter said, we were wondering when you were going to come to our side. That's so great. So that's the kind of safety and openness we want, because in the end, people who are living their authentic gender identity are the same people as when they were born and misidentified at birth. That is such a key message. that
could
I,
If I could just add one last thing, just to reiterate what I said earlier about, you don't have to understand the person coming out to you. Just to be there, to be supportive for them. That's really all we need to do, really. And for any parent supporting a trans child, that can mean the difference between life or death. So, you know, and some parents do have to deal with some transphobic comments, because it's like, well, how can you be supportive of your child? Because, you know, you're supposed to, what kind of parent are you? So sometimes there's a lot of pushback even on the parents. And I've spoken to parents who've been really upset because of that, but it's about supporting their child first and foremost, even though they have to deal with a lot of transphobic, you know, sort of what a bad parent you are kind of thing. So it's very difficult for parents as well, but just being there to be supportive, that's all we can ask, really.
Can I just say something quickly?
yes,
Suzanne is going to be talking about her book on Sunday at Don Heights Unitarian Congregation, and I put the link to the website in the chat feature. And the music will be by a transgender person named Mona of the Mona Lola rock band. So that will probably be really fun. She transitioned to female probably 20 years ago. So she's well versed and very comfortable with herself. She's a lot.
so great. Thank you. I'm so looking forward to it on Sunday. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you. Your final comments, Joe, any comments from you that you want to leave us with?
No, you know what? Stephanie said it the best. Really, you know, being there, being supportive means everything. And she's absolutely right. It can mean the difference between life and death.
Yeah.
And we've lost enough people in our community.
Yeah.
Let's not lose any more.
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you.